moving still. For days, when I got home from school, I found Papa lying flat and complaining about not being able to pick cotton because his back was killing him. He often talked about leaving Corcoran and going back to Santa Maria, but he kept changing his mind, hoping to get better. He constantly worried that we would not have enough money saved over the cotton season to carry us through the winter months. It was already the end of December, and Roberto, my older brother, was the only one working. Mama stayed home to take care of Papa, Rora, and Ruben. My other two brothers, Torito and Trumpito, went to school with me, and on weekends, when it did not rain, we went to work with Roberto. The only cotton left for us to harvest was La Bola, the leftovers from the first picking, which paid 1.5 cents per pound. But one day, when I got home, Papa did not complain about anything, not even his back. As soon as I entered the cabin, he strained to straighten up from the mattress that lay on the floor, and exclaimed, "Mi hijo, are you all right?" "Si, Papa," I responded, wondering why he looked so worried. "Gracias a Dios," he said. "La Migra swept through the camp about an hour ago, and I didn't know if the immigration officer searched your school, too." Mama must have noticed the fright in his eyes when I heard the word migra, because she immediately came and hugged me. That word evoked fear ever since the immigration raid in Tent City, a labor camp in Santa Maria where we sometimes lived. It was a Saturday late afternoon. I was playing marbles with Trumpita in front of our tent when I heard someone holler, "La Migra! La Migra!" I looked over my shoulder and saw several vans screech to a halt, blocking the entrance to our camp. The van doors flew open. Out dashed armed men dressed in green uniforms. They invaded the camp, moving through the tent, searching for undocumented workers who ran into the wilderness behind the camp, trying to escape. Many, like Doña Maria La Corredera, were caught, herded, and hauled away in Border Patrol vehicles. A few managed to get away. We were lucky. Mama and Roberto had gone to town to buy groceries. Papa showed the officers his green card that Ito had helped them get, and they did not ask about Trumpita or me. When Roberto came home from work that evening, Papa and Mama were relieved to see him. "You didn't see La Migra?" Papa asked. "It came to our camp but missed us," Mama said, rubbing her hands together. "It didn't come to the field," Roberto responded. "So you didn't go out with La Migra?" Papa said jokingly, trying to ease the tension. Roberto went along with Papa's joke. "No, Papa, she's not my type," he answered. We all laughed nervously. When Papa stopped laughing and bit his lower lip, I knew it was coming. "You have to be careful," he warned us, waving his index finger at Roberto and me. "You can't tell a soul you were born in Mexico. You can't trust anyone, not even your best friends. If they know, they can turn you in." I had heard those words so many times I had memorized them. "Now, where were you born, Panchito?" he asked in a firm voice, giving me a piercing look. "Colton, California," I answered. "Good, mi hijo." Roberto then handed Papa the money he had earned that day. Papa clenched his fists and looked away from the wall and said, "I am useless. I can't work. I can't feed my family. I can't even protect you from La Migra." "Don't say that, Papa," Roberto answered. "You know that's not so." Papa glanced at Roberto, lowered his eyes, and asked him to bring him the small silver metal box where he kept our savings. When I brought it, he sat up slightly, opened it, and counted the money aside. "If I work in Santa Maria, we might be able to get through this winter with what we've saved," he said worriedly. "But what if my back won't let me?" "Don't worry, Papa," Roberto responded. "Panchito and I can find work in Santa Maria, thinning lettuce and topping carrots." Seeing this as a chance to persuade my father to leave Corcoran, and knowing I was anxious to return to Santa Maria, Mama winked at me and said to Papa, "Roberto is right, viejo. Let's leave. Besides, the immigration might come around again. It's safer living in Santa Maria." After a long pause, Papa finally said, "You're right. We'll go back to Bonetti Ranch tomorrow morning." Like swallows returning to Capistrano, we would return to our nest, Bonsetti Ranch in Santa Maria, every year after the cotton season was over in Corcoran. The ranch became our temporary home. We had lived in the barracks 8 months out of the year, from January to August, ever since Tent City, the farm labor camp, had been torn down. The ranch was located on East Main Street, but had no address. Most of the residents were Mexican field laborers who were American citizens or had immigrant visas like Papa. This made the ranch relatively safe from the border patrols. I was excited about going back to the Bonzetti Ranch that I was the first one up the following morning. After we packed our belongings and loaded them into the car, we headed south to Santa Maria. I could hardly contain myself. Roberto and Trumpita were excited too. I imagine this is how kids felt because they talked about going away on vacation. Papa could not drive because of his back pain, so Roberto drove. The trip took about 5 hours, but it seemed like 5 days to me. Sitting in the back seat, I opened the window and stuck my head out, looking for road signs that said Santa Maria. "Can't you go faster?" I asked impatiently, poking Roberto in the back. "Sure, if you want to get us a ticket," he responded. "That's all we need," Papa said, chuckling. "If that happens, we might as well turn ourselves in to La Migra." I immediately closed the window and sat back without saying a word. After traveling for a couple of hours, Mama suggested we stop and have lunch, which she had prepared that morning. I was hungry, but I did not want to waste time. "We can eat in the car," I said, hoping my little sister and brothers would go along with that idea. "What about Roberto? He can't eat and drive," Papa responded. We stopped by the side of the road to eat. Papa slowly got out of the car, holding onto Roberto's arm and mine. He lay on the ground and stretched out his back. I grabbed my 2 egg and chorizo tacos, making sure that Papa was not looking, and signaled to Roberto to hurry. "Ya pues, Panchito," he said, a bit annoyed. "I am almost finished." After lunch, we continued our trip. The closer we got to Santa Maria, the more excited I became, because I knew that's where we were going to live for the next several months. I especially looked forward to seeing some of my classmates in the 8th grade of El Camino Junior High. I had not seen them since last June when school ended. I wondered if they'd remember me, I thought to myself. As we drove by Nipomo, the last town before Santa Maria, my heart started pounding, and as soon as I saw the Santa Maria Bridge, which marked the entrance to the city limits, I yelled out, "We're here! We're here!" Trumpita and Torito also began to cheer and woke up Ruben, who had fallen asleep. Mama looked at us and laughed. "Se han vuelto locos," Papa said, smiling, gesturing with his hand that we had gone crazy. Once we crossed the cement bridge, which went over a dry riverbed for a quarter mile, I stretched my neck and tried to pinpoint the location of Bonzetti Ranch. I knew it was where Tent City used to be, about a mile south of the city dump. The highway became Broadway and went through the center of town. When we got to Main Street, Roberto turned left and drove east for about 10 miles. Along the way, I kept on pointing out places that I recognized. Main Street School, Crest, the Fima Dive Store, the Texaco station where we got our drinking water, the hospital where Torito stayed when he got sick. We then crossed Sui Road, which marked the end of the city limits and the beginning of hundreds of acres of recently planted lettuce and carrots. When we turned into Bonzetti Ranch, I realized that nothing had changed from the year before. We were greeted by dozens of stray dogs. Roberto had to slow down the Cucaracha to a crawl to avoid hitting them, and to dodge the deep potholes in the dirt path that circled in front of the barracks. A few of the dogs belonged to the residents, but most had no owners. They slept underneath the dwellings and ate whatever they found in the garbage, but they were never alone. They were plagued by hundreds of bloodthirsty fleas. I felt sorry for them and wondered if they were bothered by the fleas as much as I was when they invaded our bed at night. The barracks were still the same. Mr. Bonzetti, the owner, continued to ignore them. Looking like victims of a war, the dwellings had broken windows, parts of walls missing, and large holes in the roof. Scattered throughout the ranch were old, rusty pieces of farm machinery. In the middle of the ranch was a large storehouse where Mr. Bonzetti kept lumber, boxes of nails, and other building supplies that he planned to use someday. We rented and moved into the same barrack we had lived in the previous year. We covered the gaps with wallboards of paper and painted the inside